Welcome to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb your cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. I'm Tanner and I'm joined by Anthony. We're two IT executives with 35 years of experience. Let's start the show. Welcome back to Off the Wire. Today we're going to be talking all things project management and especially around IT project management. But before we jump in, if you're not already subscribed to our podcast, please subscribe to it. It really helps us out, and it'll keep you in the loop when we release new episodes. And go ahead and follow us on social media. We have a LinkedIn page, we have Facebook, X, and also YouTube. You can subscribe over there. That's a great way to keep up with our content. If what you hear today is valuable to you, please share it. Just find somebody, either a colleague or a friend, that you think would be able to use it. It really helps the show grow. So we kind of wanted to start the show, Anthony, talking about kind of some of the stuff that's coming up for us. We got a couple conferences that I think we're both going to be attending. You want to kind of tell the listeners out there a little bit about that?
Yeah, first up, we're going to be at the NRECA's Tech Advantage, and we're going to be talking about communicating with your leadership and your board. That's something that, honestly, I think I've learned so much just from diving into the topic. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to apply it at my co-op now. I've definitely learned a few things from Tanner and just learned from, doing some research. And then also we're going to be at the Meridian Apex or Meridian and Futura Apex event later this summer. And anyways, we're still chasing down topics. We'll be there as well for a show.
I think we still plan on doing a podcast at Tech Advantage. So I guess TBD on what that might be. If we're still looking for ideas, if it's something that you're going to be there and you might have an idea for us, or you might even want to come on the podcast, let us know. Just reach out to us. Either shoot us an email or reach out to us on social media. It's always interesting. There's a lot of people in our industry going to be at that conference, so it's a good time. It's a good time to catch up with people that you've met in the past. And Apex is going to be really cool. As Anthony was mentioning, we're going to be actually doing a podcast as a breakout session there, so that's going to be pretty neat. And curious how that'll go. Live studio audience, I guess. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. Knowing tech things, it'll probably be some tech issue, I'm sure. But so project management, that's something that's kind of, I guess, been on our minds, both our minds, for a while. There's really two sides of IT. I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, Anthony, but well, maybe there's three sides, but the two big sides, I guess, are, to me, it's like kind of maintaining what you have and then building like something new, right? There's always something to maintain. There's always kind of legacy stuff that you've had for a while, and then the new stuff. And sometimes it feels like that, keeping all that other stuff up takes all your time.
Just like music, there's two types of music. There's Creed and there's not Creed. And with IT, there's projects and not projects. Really just projects and tickets. Assuming you got a ticketing system, I think most can be, there's a little bit of slides in between the cracks, but for the most part, it's going to lie into those two things.
Yeah, projects are huge. Obviously, everybody wants to get new technology. Everybody's pushing to get the new thing in, especially this time of year. We talked about it on one of our earlier episodes with budgets. New budget. Everybody's got a little money in their pocket. It's not the end of the year where they're trying to figure out what can't be done and what can. So everybody's coming to you and be like, hey, I need this, I need that. So Anthony, me and you've talked a lot about projects. We talk a lot, whether it's pre-show, after show sometimes. We're always talking about what we're doing. I'm not sure we've had this conversation. In your mind, how do you like deem a project successful? Like what are the things that you look for to know whether it went off without a hitch or it was just a massive fail?
A successful project to me, that it is one that is a product that's rolled out, that has buy-in from the end users of it or whoever the users are of it, and there's someone that owns it. Those are the two big things. Now you could go into the weeds and say, was it on time? Was it in budget? And those are all very important as well. But the big thing is it doing what was the goal of it? Is it meeting those goals? Do the people, are they using the product like they should? And are we getting out of what we should? Those are the big things for me.
I would agree with that. One thing that I really like struck me when you were talking there is having an ownership of a product. I think in IT, a lot of times, oh, I don't know, we by default, we kind of become the owners of technology. And I know we are kind of the supporters of it, right? But a lot of the technology we put out, I mean, it's really business related things. It's not something specifically for us. It's usually something for the business. And honestly, I don't know if you believe this or not, but I feel like it seems like technology works a lot better whenever there's someone in the business that owns it after the fact. Obviously, we're going to be a big proponent and we're going to be a large part of, let's say, that ongoing team. But it seems like it's just more successful. And you really got to find someone that's like on fire for the technology. We've had plenty of projects where we put out a technology and there was just nobody on fire for it.
Hmm.
Everybody kind of like collectively agreed we should do it, but nobody was really like a champion. And it works for a while, but without someone that's really like ongoing, like kind of keeping people trained, making sure we're doing the latest updates, it kind of like it kind of withers over time. And we've had a couple of those projects. And to your point about the business has to have it, or it has to be providing a good need. That's a huge thing too. We've had things where when we went into it, maybe when it went live, it was providing a great service, but over time it wasn't. And inevitably, those projects eventually fail, I think, as well.
Yeah, we're going through what I believe is the biggest project for at least for a co-op. We're migrating our financial information system and our customer information system. We're on the first part with our financial system, and matter of fact, at the end of next month, we're going to be going live. And this is it's a huge project. Our vendor we're working with, they have a project manager, and we've got several people on our side running the project. But we've got great ownership. We've got a new vice president of finance, and one, he's willing to, he's looking for change. I think that's important. If you got people that refuse to change, usually a new product means change, and they're going to check out or not want to do it. But anyways, we've got a great group with finance, eager to make things better. I got that warm, fuzzy feeling with this project. We've got all the right players involved, and we've been trying to over communicate. And anyways, it just seems to be going well.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. That I haven't been part of one of those at my co-op or really at any company I've been a part of to that level. And I think we call it CISFS, but really it's like ERP. And I think honestly, I think most companies would agree that's the biggest thing you can do. I mean, it's a cash register. It's usually in a lot of companies, especially sales companies, it's all the leads. It's just huge. It's usually something that's used by the most employees across the company. So how does like something I was thinking about is like I don't think we're perfect in how we do project management now, but like we've come a long way, and I don't know if you would kind of agree about you guys as well, but we really we as far as now this is specifically to technology projects, but when I first started, the way technology worked, there was a lot of people. You said that people resistant to change, and what that really rolled into is that people like wouldn't change. They would not add new technologies because of that resistance. And so the technology group felt like there was like almost the company was basically forcing them to kind of like be the agent of change, if that makes sense. And so we did. We would look at new technology. We would kind of evaluate it almost on our own, and and then we would push it out. And I think for the most part, things worked, but it wasn't great, and it was definitely bumpy. There was a long uptake on technology projects. There was people weren't super accepting of it, and even if it did work, it was we had lots of bumps along the road, even just little issues that would crop up as we went. I'm glad we don't do that anymore, but we have come a long way from that. But that's kind of the history, I guess, of project management where I'm at. Have you guys? Do you guys have anything similar to that, or what's your history there with that way you've done projects?
100% the same thing. The other thing I'll mention is, and I'm not saying this still won't happen, but a lot of times we would have stuff in the budget and we didn't roll it out that year. And it may be 2 years later, we would put it back in the budget and take another stab at it and try it again on top of the issues that you had. One thing where we got real serious with was honestly this financial information and customer information change. Now I want to say we're 2 to 3 years into this when we started looking at different vendors for this. The CEO asked me, he's like, "So which way do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go the way that our end users want to go. I don't really care. It's what our end users want." Ultimately, I feel like in this case, it's their decision. Yes, I have things that I like about one versus the other, but the most important thing is that we had user buy-in. This was really one of the big steps for us kind of changing the way we did things, was setting up a steering committee of basically like users for each section or each part of the software and doing demoing. We just basically facilitated, we would schedule the demos and we sent them to the users conference for each vendor and all that. And in the end, we interviewed each one individually and they made their decision. Anyways, but yeah, we had honestly, most of the things I've learned from project management is from seeing bad projects run or making the mistakes myself. I hate to say that, but that's where I've learned most of the things I have about project management. And unfortunately for me, I've seen enough bad things to where I know what not to do.
I will say I'm not going to be too hard on us IT folks pushing the envelope of technology, because there was a time whenever there was a lot of people, at least in our space, that had been at the company a long, long time, and they came from really an era where technology wasn't a big part of how they did their job. So there's a lot of resistance there. So maybe it was the right thing at the right time, but obviously now I think there's a lot of buy-in across any company that technology can be an empowering thing, and that we're willing to like go and do it. I mean, still there's people that are resistant to change, but they're not necessarily resistant to technology, if that makes sense. It's just
You
the
know,
change in technology and kind of learning a new thing, but they're already using a software. You might be going to a new software, but they're already on it. I remember many conversations where people were using like a paper process and went to a software process, and that was maybe a harder road just because it was putting technology in a place that it didn't exist prior. So yeah, I've got a good story I'll share a little bit later about kind of what you were just talking about there too. For those out there that are looking into project management and they want to get a better handle on it, Anthony, for a lot of us, I think recently or more recently, we've had that like kind of aha moment on projects where it's like, hey, we need to do something about this. We don't want to do things the old way. We want to improve things. I know there's methodologies out there for project management. Are you guys using any of those? Or like any of those kind of, I don't know, either development or project management specific methodologies for your projects?
no, I think there's a good place for those things, and I definitely think they're beneficial, especially for a large organization. But for like small and medium businesses, just like both of our departments, we don't have a internal SOC with 8 cybersecurity engineers. We also don't have a dedicated project manager for the organization, so we kind of know what works and what doesn't work, and we've identified those things, and we try to make sure all those things are included. But we're not really doing anything formal.
Yeah, we're not either. I actually went to a class on the PMP certification. I think it's project management professional for those that might not be aware. Man, that is something, is what I'll say. I got into it. I was like, I'm going to get PMP certified. And one, it's pretty difficult to get PMP certified because they require you to have a lot of like working time as a project manager, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But two, the way they break down a project, I think is really good for a huge project. When you have a project, I'm thinking something like we're building a new skyscraper, right? We got people that are worrying about tenants. We got people that are worrying about like the actual building of it, the people that are worried about permitting, the people that are doing procurement for all the materials, people that are doing transportation, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. I think that process is awesome because it is very formal. And because it's very formal, it keeps things from getting kind of out of line, off budget, out of your time. And when you have a large project like that, you need that kind of thing. Now, I was trying to kind of scale it down as I went to the class for smaller projects, and it's just really hard to scale. So maybe if one of our listeners out there knows of like a methodology that's kind of, I think of it in like the NIST versus CIS controls,
Mm.
kind of a methodology that's more suited for small business, medium business, I'd be all ears. Please send it our way. I just, I haven't heard of one, but we do not use anything formalized, that is. The only thing I wish we did as a company like that was formalized is really have things kind of standardized, even if we're not doing it following one of those like methodologies. I wish we had a little bit of a standardized process just so when I did a project with engineering, it felt the same as when I did a project with accounting or HR or whatever else, or myself for that matter. I just think that
Oh.
would be a good thing.
I don't want to knock those. I've worked with people that just do project management, like that's all they do. That's their bread and butter. And I've met some that do a fantastic job. But I've also worked for large organizations and where they run agile or some other method, and I've seen many projects be run terrible, even though they had the methodology down. They didn't have the right people included or didn't have buy-in. There's still some basic fundamentals, no matter what methodology. If you don't have those fundamentals, you're going to have a unsuccessful project.
Yeah, and I think that really leads us to our next segment. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're doing things currently. So I feel like we talked about where we came from and how we didn't like that. So hopefully we've changed, right? I feel like we have a little bit. I hope you guys have too. How do you guys do things currently? You talked about the way you used to do it, but what about now?
Yeah. So one of the things is up front, what like just identifying. This sounds silly, but a lot of times people will like roll this out and we're like, what's the end goal? What is the expectation here? Defining that. How is this going to benefit our organization? I think those things are really important to have a clear goal. And then also really just this goes with the methodologies, but just have a plan. Like how are you in a nutshell, how are you going to roll this out? Early on, I can think of some projects that we winged it, didn't have a plan, but we rolled it out and worked. Now, maybe we had a little bit of a plan, but I was like, here, we're going to buy the software and we're going to install it. And then we're going to let the end user start using it. But, that's not really a solid plan at all. So anyways, just kind of talk things out amongst the group and just make sure you've got a formal plan in place to roll that out. Sometimes there's a case where you're not going to have buy-in and you have to roll things out like two-factor. I don't think the end users would have ever said, oh yeah, we're all for that. But that's one of those things where you had to do. But for the most part, you do want to have buy-in, especially when it's a product that other departments or other folks outside your department are going to be using on a regular basis. You want to have buy-in. And as far as outside of communicating with them and telling them the why and how it's going to improve things, is to have them part of the project. Like I mentioned, we had a steering committee, get a few key users and have them part of it. That's the best way to get buy-in, is just to involve them in the process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And we had it was actually a tech advantage. So it's kind of funny. We're getting ready to head back there. I actually went back and looked it up because it really meant something. It's probably one of the most impressionable breakout sessions I'd ever heard. It was 2021, went to Tech Advantage. Just kind of looking forward to all the different sessions that would be there. And I saw one and it was said like from the user out. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting name. Like I'm gonna go to that. So I went to the session and I still have the notes. Actually, I pulled them up before the show. And it was I can't even remember the co-op's name, and I didn't write it down. And I looked and looked. I tried to find an agenda, but obviously that's been 4 years ago. And so I would, if you're listening, kudos to you. You did a great presentation, and you really inspired me and our co-op. So anyway, it was called From the User Out, and their whole thing was instead of deciding at like even a manager, director level, what technology you needed, they actually went and like did it from the user out. Right? They went and they interviewed all the different users, and then tried to figure out what weaknesses or what frustrations or what things that people hated about what they currently did or their current processes. And then based on what they did or based on that feedback they gathered, they actually use that to have their to basically create their plan with technology. And for me, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, you heard what I said earlier about us pushing down technology. I was like, we've not done this. We need to be doing this. So I came back. I was so excited. I found someone, and this is maybe I'm skipping ahead of some tips and tricks, but find someone at your co-op that really like digs this kind of thing, that really wants to like take kind of mundane processes like project management and make them a lot better. I found that guy, and we were like, man, our technology projects need to change, and we both agreed on it. And he got so like fired up about it that he actually made his own presentation, and we co-presented it, obviously giving credit to the original guy. And we co-presented at a conference later that year, and really we used it for the first time about a few months after that, and it's been one of the best projects we've ever had. For those that are in the cooperative space, that people in the field, they typically resist technology, and we went out there and we asked them and we said, hey, how can things get better? And we went around to each of our districts and we interviewed uh, each each person and said, you know, what about the current process needs fixing? How can we make it better? What do you want in a piece of software? We wrote all that stuff down, and then we took that and we actually made that as part of our requirements for when we did an RFP. And honestly, that project has been the best field project for sure that we've ever done, just because of what you were saying, like that input. And there's going to be some bumps along the road. I got a funny story. I'll let you chime in, but first first district we went to, we said our service order process. We know we have a service order process. We know there's some things that can get better. How do you guys feel? What improvements could we make to the service order process? First person said nothing. That's how we got started when we did our interviews. Nothing at all. It's perfect. Always sticks with me after that. I was like, well, if we can win that person over, we'll win everybody over. But it's been a great project. We're still finalizing things, I guess, even a couple years later. But we've tried to integrate that into all our projects that we've done since then.
Yeah, it's especially for the large projects. Right, obviously, we do some smaller things that it's not supportable, but when we're doing the bigger lists, you definitely want to do those things. A couple other things that just pop on my mind as far as what helps make a successful project is, and I would say communicate, but I've been starting to say the word over communicate. I would rather lean towards over communicating than not doing enough. So we try to over communicate. And then another thing is it's really just being kind of flexible. And if you see things going in the wrong direction, speak up and stop. Like it's so much better to fix it up front than afterwards. If someone reaches out to you and like, hey, I don't think it's going to work, like hash that out, communicate about it, and see if there's something there. Not sometimes you can talk through things through, and it may not be an issue, but definitely don't just sit idle and let the project go in the wrong direction. Another thing I would say is, and this is especially for us with the large projects, uh, people just have their own strengths and their own weaknesses, and I've got some strengths and I've got a whole lot of weaknesses. And I've got some other folks that they're good at some things that where I'm weak at. And if you're doing a really big project, I would try to, when you think about forming that group that's going to be running that project or kind of leading that up, is think about the weaknesses and the strengths of each individual and trying to tailor it, because you got to have clear communications. You got to be organized. And that's one thing. Like I feel like I'm a good communicator. I'm sure some people would disagree, but I'm not organized at all. Some of the other things, some of the other traits that you want someone that's approachable. So if you got like, I hate to pick on engineers, but I also love to pick on engineers. If you got an engineer that's not approachable at all, like he needs someone to help, like be the liaison be approachable if someone identifies something. So you want to make sure you have someone capable for talking to folks and getting things out there. And then the last thing is really, this is just for everyone that's involved, is everyone needs to be supportive, honest, and trusting. Like that's something you need. Everyone that's involved, like you got to have that. If you got someone that's going to be talking bad about why are we doing this, they can kind of poison the well and ruin a project.
Yeah, you make some great points there. I agree with every one of those. The only couple things I'll add is when you're coming up with a project group, you want to start with a core group and then expand it to a larger group. So that's what we did in this project that I was mentioning earlier. We started with a group of like 5 of us. Then we went and did interviews. So we expanded that group into a huge group of like 80 people because we were going and interviewing all these people. Then we came back to 6. Then whenever we actually went through demos, we expanded it to a subset of those same 80 people that we interviewed so that they could actually get hands-on with it and report back to their fellow colleagues. And then we kind of shrunk it back to core team, and then we expanded a little bit when we went live. Because you don't want to be inefficient. I think you get a super big group and it's just inefficient and nothing ever gets done. And a small group doesn't take in everybody's input. So kind of find that sweet spot and don't be afraid to adjust it as you go. And the other thing I would say and add to that is be objective. Ideally, you take the input like I was talking about and you make an actual objective scorecard. We started doing this even with our IT specific projects that don't really involve other, like say we're getting a new server hardware or we're buying a new SAN or something like that. We literally go out and we list like what do we think's important? Reliability, yep, that's there. Management, that's there. Cost, right? Value, all those kinds of things. And we try to be pretty specific. Then we assign a weight to each one of those. And then when we go through the demos, we actually fill it out and we say, like, okay, have they proven that they'll be reliable? Okay, then they may get like a 5 out of 5 in that category. Have they proven that they have some awesome new features? Okay, 5 out of 5. And then we multiply it by the weights and figure out like an actual score. And a lot of times we just go by the score because a lot of you get in there and you start doing an evaluation in a project and you kind of get that gut feeling. Maybe that gut feeling's not right. People always say follow your gut, and sometimes you do have to if it's really close. But what we have seen is when we started doing that, we were actually surprised by some of the picks we made because we were actually looking at things objective. We were kind of taking our emotions out of it. We were taking who does a better demo out of it. We were taking what salesman was like more friendly, and not that those things are not important because you need support after the sale, but it really, really helped us.
That's funny. I've never even thought to do that. And like I do it for interviews. Like I'll have a scorecard for each person. Whether that's a good thing or not, I do it. That's definitely something that I think when we're looking at products would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's helped us out, and we don't always look at. Sometimes we're just replacing what we have with this like a new version of this from the same vendor. But if we're looking at like 3 or 4 vendors, that's helped us out quite a bit. So I mentioned this earlier, tools of the trade. We wanted to talk a little bit about some project management tools. And first question I would ask is what tools? So I think for many years we had no tools or no formal tools. If we had anything, it might have been a Word doc or an Excel sheet or something like that. And not that that's bad. Like I would say, I think you're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I got a funny story in it, and then we talked about this pre-show that it might be a future episode we do. So we started looking at project management tools, and we started kind of polling. And to my point earlier, we didn't have any tools, so we started looking at one and just testing it. And then we got to thinking, okay, it would be good to have a project management tool. Let's ask other people in the company if they have an interest, and if they do, let's create a team. Let's start evaluating because maybe the tool that we've been demoing isn't the best one. Well, come to find out, we already had 4 tools. We had, and we're going to talk about them a little bit in a minute. But we were testing a ClickUp. Another group had just approached me about buying Smartsheet. Asana was already in place, and Trello was already in place. So Shadow IT might be an episode that we do in the future. That's something that is definitely becoming more and more of a problem with the ease of software as a service and all that stuff. So I guess find out what tools you have maybe is my advice there. I thought we were thinking about maybe getting one, and we actually had some already. We ended up doing ClickUp, by the way. And I do highly recommend project specific tool. But I know, Anthony, you were talking about like if you got if you don't have anything and you don't have the money for anything, you still can do a great job of project management.
Some people cringe when they hear the word spreadsheet, but I do think it's better than nothing. But I think really a lot of people have tools maybe they're not aware of. I think most of us have Microsoft 365 at this point. A large percentage of us do. And Microsoft has To Do and Planner, but that's free with your Microsoft 365 subscription. And if you just need something to basically assign resources, assign people, assign tasks, and do like start dates and end dates and kind of like milestones, either a spreadsheet or To Do or Planner, those all fit your need. We got to the point where we were using To Do for several years. And matter of fact, we got some other departments using it, but we outgrew it. And honestly, I stole this from Tanner. He showed me what they were doing with ClickUp, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we need. And really, we've just hit it up really hard these last couple months. And I haven't really looked at a whole nother product, but as soon as I saw it, I was kind of in love. And the other people in my department that looked at it too were like, that's what we need. That's what we need right there. And anyways, we're very happy with it. I'm sure there's other products out there that are great and do stuff very similar, but anyways, it fit exactly what we need, and it's easy to use.
So yeah, I had mentioned ClickUp to you. I thought it was funny. You were like, I got ClickUp, and I was like, all right, man, one more to the fold. But there are a lot of great tools out there. We did some evaluation on some project management specific tools. We looked at Asana since we already had it, but and we also looked at Smartsheet. We looked at, gosh, I'm trying to remember, like Rix or something like that. We also looked at Monday.com and a few others as well. And honestly, we liked ClickUp the best. That's what actually, as all four of those groups that had project management, we kind of came together and decided, like, hey, this one actually works the best. We did our objectives before we went out and did the demos, so highly recommend that. But they're really pretty close. I don't really think you can go wrong. I think all of them can do a really good job with like the basic project management stuff, and it's truly around the edges. To kind of use a burger analogy, like they're all pretty much the same patty. It's just what toppings you get on there. So I don't think there's a bad, and they're not really that expensive too. I will say we could probably do a whole show where I complain about this, but they do charge. You have to go to the enterprise for the SSO and some of the higher level security features, and it seems like every single one of them is exactly the same in that regard. But if you don't have to have that, there's some actually lower tier packages that have pretty much all the basics that you need. Anthony, you guys have been on ClickUp a little shorter than we are, but like I was curious. I hadn't really asked you in a while, but like how are you guys using it and how is it got, I guess, integrated into what you're doing project management wise?
Yeah, so we really were having a battle of some of our projects were we had some projects in To Do, and we had some that were being entered into our ticketing system. And anyways, I needed to stop that. The big thing that we didn't have with To Do was I needed a spot for other departments to make requests, so we didn't have a way to do that. And you showed me how you do like budget requests, and we have something like that, but we also expanded on that. We have really, I broke it down into 3 categories, and one's kind of a blanket. It's just IT projects. If there's a big IT project, we got a form out there. And a lot of things that we talked about is what's the purpose of it? Who's going to own the product afterwards? Those are questions we ask up front, and to kind of really standardize these projects. And the other 2 things that we did is constantly we're getting asked for reports or data analytics. And sometimes it's just customizing a report and it doesn't take very long. But a lot of times they're asking for something new and it has to be built up in Tableau or something like that. And they can take some time. Or we've got a developer that does some custom in-house products, and like those take time and those need to be a project request. So we've got a form for that to help streamline. And two, just to make sure that our folks that do the reports, that they get all the information that's needed up front. A lot of times they'll say, I need to report on this, and they got to go back and forth 10 times to get all the data from them. And then the last one, we have some fiber. We've got over 400 miles of fiber, and there's a lot of projects that come with that. Like we're redoing our transmission, and our fiber follows our transmission. So when they are changing out poles and stuff like that, a lot of times we got to move our fiber around. And anyway, so we did that just to help make sure that we stay on target, meet the deadlines, aren't holding up these very expensive contractors that are rebuilding our transmission. So that's been an issue, and that's to help solve that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and that's one of the things I really love about ClickUp is kind of all the options it has. One of those being the ability to request or put out a form that then comes into a project, right? So, and that's something that maybe if you look at one of these project tools and you decide to go with it, you can kind of think about as some parts of a project are already preset and some parts of a project maybe need to have requests. Like think of change management, right? That'd be a great reason to have a form. So you can have a project all planned out and then also have a request form for a change management process as part of that. So ClickUp does a lot of great things. Like I said, I don't think it's drastically different than a lot of the other options out there. They'll all do the Gantt charting, the calendar, the dependencies, obviously setting who's responsible for something, subtask, all those kinds of things. I really love the ability for these tools to do templating. So if you have a project that's similar, maybe you have a task that you do every year, you can have it like pop itself back up once you've completed it, and it'll have all the same subtask, all the same notes, all the same everything else. So really, really like that. And in fact, for those that may be interested, jet out on YouTube. There's honestly YouTube videos where people have taken ClickUp and the other platforms and made all kinds of crazy things with them. So they're very, very flexible. They're not very expensive. I highly recommend getting one. And then the hardest part will be getting the entire company to use it. So we have about 4 departments using it so far, working on a fifth and trying to let them have input and kind of let them do things their own way. That's one of the things that has helped is when we made new departments and new spaces, we let them set up their projects and their workflow the way they wanted to. And because of that, they didn't feel like we were pushing technology on them.
Our CEO saw the product and heard us talking about it, and we're actually moving our strategic planning over to it and some of the tasks that came associated with it. So yeah, I would love if the entire organization. It's one of those things where we just had an internal need and we rolled it out internally, but I would love for our other departments to start utilizing it. It would definitely some of those inter office projects. It would help with those greatly.
All right, so thinking kind of we alluded to this earlier, tips and tricks. Me and you have both had several conversations now that we have a project management tool about tickets versus task. Have you come to any conclusion about that?
I'll start with a ticket. That's usually just that's something that's already existing and they're asking for a fix, or there's a bug, or maybe just a small change request. There's a little bit of, you've got to give the end user directions. Sometimes they might get it wrong. And in general, like a project or a task that we're going to have under a project is just something that, that we're planning out to build. Another thing though is just if it's something that is going to take over a full workday for one individual, that's definitely going to be listed as a project for us. But we try to do break fix stuff as a ticket, and then any of the like build out new functionality and stuff like that, have that as a project.
Yeah, we're still sorting through it as well. I don't know that we have a good conclusion yet, but I will say for those out there that might be listening or watching and you don't have like any help desk system at all, you can make one of these project management tools into a pseudo help desk and you can maybe knock out two things with one stone. So, highly recommend giving them a look. It's not perfect, it's not as good as a dedicated help desk system for sure, but I think it can actually do it, especially if you don't have anything else in place. And We talk about this a lot at work where we prefer to have platforms where we can do multiple things and they're flexible. So I could see this as being kind of in line with that thinking. We talked about meetings and pre-show. With projects, there's a tendency, especially now that we have teams, to only do virtual meetings, kind of what we're doing here now, recording. There's some pros and cons to that. I think in the workplace, a lot of people are just going to work on things, other things, while they're listening to a meeting. They're not going to be focused. I think virtual meetings have a place where it's hard to get everybody together, or you just need maybe a short meeting. I think they work better as short meetings. Long meetings, I think it's much better to do them in person. Do you kind of feel the same way, or are you like all kind of pro virtual meeting, pro in person?
I mean, just like you said, each has its place, but really you got to take in who you're dealing with, because we've got some people where if it's not face to face, you might as well just not do it. Co-ops, I don't think I'm going to be judged for saying this, but a lot of us are kind of old school and old thinking and really face to face. I do think in general, face to face is always going to be a little bit better than having a virtual meeting, but sometimes you gotta have that flexibility and stuff like that. The one thing I will say with just with communications, it is great to set up like a chat for the people involved so they can quickly communicate. Not like for the meetings per se, but just when you need to communicate real quick, because email, like I get so many emails, like if you email me, good luck getting a response. But when someone teams me, that really gets that gets an instant reaction from me. And anyway, so we'll set up like a channel in a chat group and make sure we're communicating with that. I mean, we still use email as well, especially with dealing with vendors, but I think they can help with that.
Now I know where all those emails I sent you about show ideas are going. No, I'm kidding. I do agree with that. The vendors are notorious about using email, and I kind of get it. Chat is still not to a point where it's super easy to kind of integrate all your third parties into it. I wish it was. It's, well, let me just say it this way. It's not easy to securely integrate all your third parties into it. I do wish it was, but we're just not there yet. So email is still a pretty big tool. One thing we've done recently, and I'm trying to get the vendors to buy in on this on their side. They're buying into it on our side, but what we do at the start of every project is we create a brand new distribution group, and we call it like the company at blueridgeenergy.com. So think of like, let's say we were buying Monday, right? We'd call it Monday at blueridgeenergy.com. And then we would tell them every time you email us about anything related to our account, you email Monday at blueridgeenergy.com. And that way we have everybody in the loop. I don't have to make internal like chats or emails telling everybody, well, I heard from our Monday account rep and they're saying this. What should I tell them? Okay, I'm going to tell them this and reply back. It makes it really easy for information to be disseminated quickly. And typically, whoever people kind of know when it comes to a group who needs to respond, who's like the project manager or who's in charge of invoicing or who's in charge of whatever thing, and they do. And then it replies to the group. So everybody's kind of in loop on the replies. And it's tended to make a lot easier the process of communicating. I have tried to get the vendors to agree to do this on their side too, so that there's only two email addresses we need to know. Whatever the
Yeah.
vendor sets up and whatever we set up with a particular project. I have not gotten that far yet. But the nice thing about a distribution group as well is you can remove and add people as the project goes along. So if people, maybe someone in procurement needs to be there at the very beginning, but once you're past the procurement stage, they don't need to be there. You can just remove them from the group, and now they no longer get all that communication. And it just allows you to have a lot more control over how information is disseminated. You can expand it, to my point earlier about larger groups. You can expand it when needed. You can shut it down when it's not needed. And yeah, you're going to get some emails that are probably you're just going to look at and delete. But I would rather do that. And I feel like people tend to like not care as much about that as they care about not being involved in a particular decision. And so that would definitely be one of my tips.
That's actually a really good one. I don't know. I haven't had it lately, but I've definitely dealt with vendors where I'm like, make sure you include such and such on this email on all correspondence. And the next thing you know, like they left them off. Like that actually is a pretty good idea. And like you mentioned, the flexibility to be able to add and remove folks. Yeah, I think we might use that.
Yeah. Well, good. It's been good, and honestly, just for like invoices or something, it's kind of nice too. Because if someone like forgets and lets an invoice slip, someone will be like, "Hey, did you get to that invoice?" It's been really handy. So I recommend doing that.
One thing I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention is cybersecurity in projects. So this is something that we've changed, and I really learned this from Hewlett Packard, but it took a while to get this way at Fort County. But early on, like we would just kind of trust a vendor to make sure that they're securing things and doing the security fundamentals. And anyways, that's something that's definitely changed for our department. Security is one of the first things we bring up is how we're going to secure this. And a lot of times we're finding that the way the vendors are going to roll things out don't really meet our security requirements. And this is one of those things where if you wait till after the project's done, good luck getting those changes. And another thing that we've done is we take our vulnerability scanner before we do a sign off. We'll do a vulnerability scan against the system. And if there's the highs and criticals, well, guess what? You're not going to get paid for that final invoice until you address those vulnerabilities. And the other thing I would mention, and we're working towards this, we're not there yet, but when you're consistently using a set of security controls, like we talked about the CIS framework, apply there's certain security controls that are applicable to whatever system that you're putting out, and just kind of make sure that they're meeting those. It's so much easier to do security up front than it is to make it an afterthought and try to get it afterwards. You've got all that leverage when they're rolling out the project. You need to take advantage of that.
That makes perfect sense. There's some good points. I definitely agree with you, and I hate that we have to do that now. I mean, I hate that we have to do security evaluations and stuff, but you're right. And I think a lot of it is just salesmen that don't really know the technical details. But it's better to check, and honestly, it's our responsibility to check because we're going to be the ones protecting it. So, just good thoughts. So, kind of as we starting to finish up here, we talked a little bit about where we came, kind of how things are going now. Some tips and tricks, some tools we're using. But like in your mind, has project management gotten better at Fort County?
It definitely has. And one thing I didn't really touch on is morale. So I'll tell two different instances of morale. For my department, nothing hurts morale more for my department than to work hard, bust your hump, and roll out a product and no one uses it. That's why we ask up front, what's the end goal? Was there an owner? Because that hurts my feelings and the folks that work with me. It really bothers them to have spent all this time and to see a product not getting used. And then the flip side, really just as an organization, having buy-in and including people, like it empowers them. And honestly, I'm never going to forget this. When we started doing the steering committee for looking at CIS, FIS vendors, I had a young lady that when we were doing the one-on-one interviews, she started crying in my office, and she thanked me for listening to her. She felt like she had never really been heard, and it just meant a lot to her. And anyways, that's something I'll never forget. And just it really does help morale to have well-run projects.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful story, and I think people really just want to be heard, right? And what better time to hear it when you're going to probably put a technology in place that impacts their job? And if you look at it in their shoes, like, what a slap in the face to do it in any other way, to put something in without asking them when they're the main user of the product. So I'm glad it's gotten better where I'm at too, and I'm glad it has because honestly, from not even a technology standpoint, obviously the technology benefits are numerous, but just I think it's the right thing to do. So for those out there that maybe like we were and have projects that are going maybe not the right way, it's never too late. You can always do it. Yeah, go ahead and start somewhere. Be the kind of the difference you want to see, and it may take a while, but you'll be able to convince people whenever something's actually being done a lot better and more efficiently. Other people will recognize that and they'll want to get on that train. Final thought I had is that project management, it's not something you can just kind of set up and say, this is the way we're going to do things, and we don't need any more input into that. It's kind of like a muscle. If you don't use it, it's going to atrophy. It's going to get less strong. So when you do your projects, like I'm even thinking as we were talking today, some of the stuff that it's little things throughout our projects that we haven't really emphasized, and we need to go back and do that, because if we don't, kind of all the gains we had will maybe slowly start eroding. So keep using it, keep doing it, keep improving it, work your process, and don't ever feel like you've arrived. There's a little bit more improvement you can make, and I've really learned a lot of that tonight and thought about that a lot. Anthony, what about you? Any final thoughts to leave with the listeners, viewers tonight?
Yeah, just really to add on what you said, just it's one of those things where you're going to get better over time. Just keep at it and try to. There's tons of free resources out there outside of listening to this podcast. There's all kinds of things that talk about project management, and just keep trying and keep plugging away and keep trying to improve each. Every time you do a project, try to improve upon it. And then, like I said, just include people that, if you've got a weakness in organization, make sure you got someone else helping you out that's well organized. Hopefully, you know what your strengths and weaknesses are and try to find the other people to help make that well rounded, help you out.
I like that. I think that's good advice for not only projects, but just for life. Have people in your friends group or your colleagues group that help round you out as a person and kind of round off your sharp edges. So that's the end of our episode today. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any episode ideas, please shoot us an email at show@offthewirepodcast.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. Anthony and I talked about the two conferences we're going to be attending. One's coming up here really shortly. If you see us there, we're going to be walking around a bunch, obviously attending things and looking at different technologies. But come up and just say, hey, we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any thoughts for us, definitely stop us and let us know what you think. Or we'd love to chat with you and just talk shop a little bit. So come see us at Tech Advantage. We release episodes every other Monday. And until next time, this is Off the Wire.